Hi, and welcome to your guide on how to navigate an appraisal. And our guide for today is Jared. Jared, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
So, Jared, before we get started, if you were a neighborhood somewhere not in Atlanta, somewhere else in the world, what city or neighborhood would be your spirit neighborhood?
I would say I'm going to go city, and I love Sydney, Australia. Yeah, I went there a long time ago, so that's why I can't remember the exact neighborhood. But I mean, I love Atlanta, but I would love for us to have some water, and that's the one thing I think we're missing. And Sydney, just being on the water, cool architecture, was walkable, was clean, was great. The people were super friendly. I don't know if I'll ever get on another 18-hour plane ride again, but it was still really great. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. Never been there. Would love to go. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into our guide on appraisals. So first of all, why don't we start with the basics? Because a lot of times I hear people say appraisal and inspection, and I'm not sure they actually know what the difference between those two words and those two functions are. So tell us exactly what an appraisal is.
Sure, yeah. So once you, in the process of buying a home, once you go under contract, there's really like 3 hurdles that we have to clear. And generally it goes in this order. The first one is the home inspection. So having, the home inspected by a home inspector and kind of working through any details or surprises that come up with there. And then the second one is what we're talking about here is the appraisal. And the appraisal is, it's something that's ordered by the bank, and they do it through a blind process. So your loan officer or your bank doesn't really directly get to choose. And it's their tool for measuring whether or not they want to loan you the money. And so in other words, it's that appraiser's opinion of the value of the home. And so they want to make sure that what you're paying for lines up with their appraiser's opinion, just to make sure, one, you're getting a fair deal, and two, they're lending the appropriate amount of money.
So you're telling me that the bank orders the appraisal, but they don't know who they're actually ordering to do it? Is that right?
Yes, that is, I guess, what I said, is it?
And why, and I'm joking about that, but why do they do that?
Yeah, obviously there's a state license board for appraisers, and each bank has a pool. But they do it to make sure that, everything's done in good faith, and that you're getting, really, it's in the best interest if the buyer gets a true neutral, someone that's not invested in the transaction, maybe like a loan officer would be, and gets an honest opinion of the value to make sure that they feel good about it, and to see what it's really worth, at least in one other person's opinion.
And so the appraiser comes out to the house, and the appraiser is trying to, you said, determine the value of the house. That's their job while they're there?
Exactly, yeah. So if the contract price is $350, they're going to do some research and find, typically 3 to 6 comparable sales, and they'll adjust those based on how they relate to the home that you're buying. And then they'll go to the home itself. They'll measure it, make sure the square footage is accurate, take pictures of everything, and then use that to determine their final opinion, and how it relates to the comparable properties, either in the building or in the neighborhood.
What are the biggest factors that go into determining that value and determining how it compares to the comparables? Yeah,
they try to turn real estate pricing into a science as much as they can. Obviously, like most people buy based on looks and feels and emotion and where it is and all that good stuff. And the appraisers kind of try to take as much of a scientific approach as you can. So the number one factor is the size. So they're looking at the price that you're paying per square foot. So the larger homes typically, do better, even if in reality they need to be updated. The appraisers typically don't give as much credit for homes that have been, even if we have 30 people through the open house and they all rave about the master bath and how beautiful it is, the appraiser's not going to give as much value to that as they would the size of the home.
Yeah. So there are things that the appraiser, they do value when something is renovated or something is nice, but what things would you say what things would you say that the appraisers value less than buyers? So in the market, the buyer may value, hey, I really love this and I'm willing to pay for it. but it's hard for the appraisers to turn that into the science of putting those numbers down on paper.
Right. So I think the smaller homes that are beautifully renovated don't typically appraise as well, even though, I mean, we've had times where they've received multiple offers. So obviously there is a quote market value for it. But it's just hard to indicate that on paper. So I'd say anytime, you know, a kitchen or a master bath or a whole house renovation, those are just a little bit harder to come through on appraisal. And then yard is another thing. I can't tell you how many people have a backyard, as I have dogs, I have kids, like that's a must have for me. It's rare to see any adjustment, at least in my experience, for a yard, more than maybe a few $1,000s. And conversely, you know, a lot of times like people have, let's say, for example, I don't want to live on a busy road, and that's a major red flag for me. Sometimes there's no adjustment at all for being on a busy road. So not all of it translates to what buyers actually value in the market. Again, you know, it's just one of many tools to, you know, help the bank understand what the value is, and you know, hopefully the buyer as well.
Yeah, but it is not exactly market value. I mean, when I get my appraisal back when I'm buying a house, should I say whatever is on there is the actual market value?
No. No, I mean, market value is what someone in the market is willing to pay.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I alluded to that earlier, but I mean, we've certainly had houses that receive multiple offers. So, I mean, if you're getting multiple offers, let's say in the first weekend, clearly value is established. People want to buy it. And we've, you know, there have been rare instances where we've had low appraisals there, which makes just no sense.
Yeah.
Because you're right, the point should be to identify the actual market value. And really the only way to know that is to have buyers tell you what it is.
Yeah. So on this appraisal, and I always think this is interesting, I get a lot back, hey, my appraisal was the exact value that I'm buying the house. Why does that happen so often that I'm buying the house for $288,000 and my appraisal is exactly $288,000?
I don't know. That's a great question. I've always wondered why they see the contract price. You know, I've seen some refinance appraisals as well. And so, you know, I think a lot of times they're just making sure that the value is there and looking out for the buyer. It is really rare to see an appraisal go for much more than the contract price when you're talking about a purchase. Now, the refinance appraisals that I've seen have been all over the place.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've even thought on my own house, like, that's too high, or I couldn't really get that on the market. But without some kind of guideline, it's really a tough task for the appraisers to figure out, you know, what it should be.
So Jared mentioned this, the appraiser actually gets your sales contract. So they know what you're buying the house for. And the most common number that the appraisal comes out at is the actual price that you're buying the house, which basically says, hey, we feel good about this. This is good, fine for the bank to lend on it. But people should feel good if their appraisal comes in well above what they're buying the house for. I mean, in that case, it doesn't necessarily mean you could sell it for exactly that, but that is a really good sign, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, appraisers by nature are conservative. And so if they're not bringing it down to the contract price, if they're going, I mean, $5,000, $10,000 over even, odds are they probably tried to get it down as close to the contract price as they can. And that's where they landed. So absolutely. You should feel good about that. Instant equity for sure.
Yeah. What about on the flip side? Now, what happens when an appraisal comes in under the contract price? So maybe you're buying the house for $300,000, but the appraisal comes in at $290,000. What happens then? Can people still buy the house?
They can, yeah. I'd say the first thing is, again, it's just one person's opinion. And because of the blind process, I mean, we've seen, you know, appraisers that live in Peachtree City and they're appraising things in Marietta. And so obviously, you know, there's intricacies to the Marietta market. So again, I guess step one is, you know, feel confident in the research that you did up front. To your question, can you actually buy the house? The answer is yes, you can. There's a few different paths if we run into this. The first step is if you truly believe once you review the appraisal that they missed some homes, they didn't choose the best comps, or that they made any factual errors, you can appeal it and go through an appeal process. And then, yeah, after that, you can use that as an opportunity to renegotiate with the seller to come to some type of agreement as well. Those are the two most common outcomes. There's a few others that could happen as well.
Yeah. So if you were to give people one piece of advice around appraisals or one secret that most people wouldn't know, what would you say is one of the most important things to get through this part of the process, the appraisal?
Yeah, I would say just keep in mind that the appraisal is not the end all be all. Trust your own research and watching the market. If you've been home buying, home shopping for 3 or 4 months, and you're seeing homes go under contract quickly, I would say trust your own judgment there in terms of how aggressively to make an offer, obviously along with your agent. The appraisal is, again, one person's thought. So it's nice to have. If it comes in high, it's supportive. If it comes in low, it's not necessarily bad. It's just one data point among, a lot of your experience.
I love that. It is just one data point, and the appraiser isn't the one buying the house. So whether they appraise it high or low, you're not selling it to them either way.
That's a great point.
All right. Well, Jared, thanks for being our guide through appraisals. And everyone, we hope you enjoyed this guide. We will see you at the next one. Thanks, Jared.